Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery coach. I'm thrilled to be with you here today because we're discussing one of the most powerful forces in the universe and something we all have access to all of the time. Now, I'm talking about forgiveness, which is the fifth key skill in the Life Mastery cycle. Today, we're going to talk about an overview of forgiveness. We're going to talk about whether or when we should forgive and forget. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of forgiveness, and we're also going to talk about creating an empowering habit of forgiveness. Now, my guest today spent much of her life being an unconscious victim, pretending to be happy until 2001, when her study of forgiveness helped her to heal her past and bring personal power, freedom, and joy into every area of her life. She's a delightful powerhouse who is absolutely passionate about forgiveness, and she has committed the rest of her life to inspiring others to make gratitude and forgiveness a natural way of being. She has a fabulous book entitled The Forgiveness Habit, which we'll show you a little bit later, and you will absolutely must get a hold of that book as soon as possible, because it will really heal your life. Anyway, please join me in welcoming JoAnn Rotermund to today's show. Welcome, JoAnn. Thank you so much for being here. I'm glad we finally made this happen, and it's great to have your smiling face there on the other side.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. I also am glad we're finally making it happen. It's great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, honestly. I love you. I think you're an amazing woman, and I think my audience, my tribe is going to love you too. So
thank you.
I remember when we first met, I believe it was at one of the Messenger Summit
yes.
events.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember watching you stand up on stage and talk about your forgiveness. And what really got my attention was how you started your speech. Do you remember that?
I'm not sure which talk you're talking about. Do you mean the one where I started off with that I used to be a screaming, raging bitch?
Yes, that's the one. And just the way you stood up on stage and said that, as if, okay, good, this is the way it is. But you obviously don't look like that. You don't behave like that. And so it was a great inspiration to me to watch you and to say, wow, she doesn't seem that way at all. I wonder how she changed it. It really got me into an inquisitive and curious state of being. Now, I know you've talked about learning about forgiveness and how that helped you to overcome this rage and stuff that was going on for you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how that happened and what that was like for you? What was your journey like?
Okay. Let me say first that I wasn't always a screaming, raging bitch. When after I'd been married about 9 years, I went into a deep depression and spent about 9 months in bed and not letting anybody know what was going on until I finally encountered a therapist that I liked very much, and I started seeing her. And she helped me with everything. She was tremendous. She helped me, changed my life in so many ways, except for one. She could not get me to express any anger. No matter what she did, what she got me to do, no matter what she said, I could not express any anger because I'd been taught well by my parents never to express anger. Never. Right. And
so you had it all.
I had it stuffed. I had it stuffed. I had it stuffed down deep inside, and she couldn't get it out. And she even told me one time I was the most passive person she had ever met in her life. And then my husband got transferred 2,000 miles away. We moved away, and I didn't bother to get anybody else. But one day, I was out getting some gas in the car, and some guy behind me hollered at me. And guess what? I hollered back at him.
Hmm.
And I had never done that before. And I went home and thought about it. And it's like, well, that's interesting. And another time I was out a few days later and something happened and I hollered at the person. And I went home and like, wow, no wonder my parents didn't want me to get angry. That feels good. And I did it again. And
So
I did it again.
You enjoyed it. Yeah.
I loved it. I was so proud. I was finally expressing anger, and oh, it was so good. And since the problem, what happened is I didn't seek out any help. I didn't find another therapist or anyone to talk to or anything. I just went on getting angry and expressing anger and enjoying it. And eventually I got to where I, if I went into a store or a mall and someone just looked at me in a way I didn't like, I'd scream at them. And if someone, the clerk in the store did something I didn't think was right, I'd scream. And I wanted everybody in the store to hear me because I was right and she was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted everyone to know it. And
right.
I eventually, clearly it got totally out of control. And when my daughters would beg me, plead with me, because, going into a mall, please, Mom, please promise us you won't scream at anybody. I'd promise. But I had no control over it.
I honestly don't know if it was your end or if it was my end. All I know is I suddenly could not hear you anymore.
Okay.
And so when I left and came back in, now I can hear you again. So
okay.
If that's again, if I for whatever reason cannot hear you, I'm going to leave and come back.
Okay.
So anyway, I interrupted your talk.
Okay. Well, what I was trying to say is I actually, over several years, I got to where I was out of control. I was truly out of control. Anybody upset me the least on the telephone, in a store, anywhere, I would scream. I would scream at them. And I wanted everybody around to hear me because I was right and they were wrong, and I wanted everyone to know it. Eventually, of course, my daughters begged me. My husband pleaded with me. I could see I was losing friends and everything, and I knew I had to do something. And the whole thing about forgiveness kept showing up around me. And magazines I'd pick up, books. On TV, I was just kept hearing about forgiveness. So finally, I was taking a course one time, and we were supposed to come up with something that we wanted to give our lives to, give the rest of our lives to, that would make a difference in our lives and a difference for the world. And we would just spend the rest of our lives putting this out into the world. And so I took on forgiveness. So I had to study because I wasn't forgiving at that point. Sure. I grew up, I was a preacher's daughter. I grew up in church, but so you're taught to forgive, but no one tells you how to do it.
Right.
And so I started reading and studying, and I got to where I was doing some forgiveness. It was helping. It was good, but I wanted something more. And so I kept reading and studying and reading and studying. And finally, I came up with, I was reading a sermon that someone had published, that a pastor had published. And in it, he said something about making forgiveness. I can say this more later on, but it's actually it was what had me just really, when I read it. Here's what I read. True forgiveness is not an action after the fact. It is an attitude with which you can enter each moment. And that's from Reverend David Ridge, Living Water Unity Church in Westminster, Colorado. And that, when I read that, I stopped and I said, that's what I'm looking for. That's it. That's right. What I've been reading and studying. I want to learn how to be forgiving every moment of the day, every day, all the time. That forgiveness is just the way I live, because I was so unhappy with my screaming and raging. And So then I had to start doing more studying. So I want to make it a way of life. I want to make it, what I eventually ended up calling a habit. And so I did a lot more studying and reading and working and talking to people and working with it, and eventually wrote the book, The Forgiveness Habit.
Yeah, can you just put that up on the screen so people can see it?
Sure, there it is. Can you see it?
Yeah, it says The Forgiveness Habit, an action plan for healing ourselves and our planet.
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And I got Desmond Tutu to write the foreword for me.
That's pretty amazing too.
Yeah. And there's kind of an interesting story around that. When I first wrote to his assistant and asked if he would be, I had contacted a couple of other powerful, well-known people about writing the foreword for the book, and I got a straight back from them. No, he can't do it. No, not possible. That's it. Okay. So it wasn't even a consideration. What I got back from Desmond Tutu's assistant was, well, he's so busy right now. He's traveling and speaking. He's traveling all over the world. He can't do it right now. Well, that to me was not a no.
It was a not now.
That was a not now. So I waited 6 weeks and sent another email to the assistant. Got the same answer again. I did that 6 times. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
My book was ready to publish. It was totally ready, except for this foreword. And so finally, after the 6th time, and it was 6 weeks in between each time, the answer I got back from the assistant was, yes, he can do it now. He's not speaking. He's at home now. Here's what he needs from you.
Great. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So JoAnn, tell us now, what I heard you say before was in your description of forgiveness by this pastor, it's not an after the fact act. It's more of an attitude. Help us understand what the difference is between those two things.
Okay. We're always taught to think about forgiveness as something you do after someone has hurt you in some way or upset you in some way or something, done you some big wrong, and you forgive them in some way. That's a good thing to do, is to forgive them after something has happened to you. And that is, that's a lot of forgiveness is that way. That's happens a lot. Nothing wrong with that. But if we're really going to be forgiving, if forgiving is really going to be a part of our lives, we need to be forgiving as a way of life, something that is just who we be every moment of every day, all the time. And it's not something you do because you get upset, although that can be and that can happen. But it's just a way you be that gives you an awesome freedom, incredible inner power and joy. Because you're forgiving because it makes you love life, happy. It just works to make you happy and feel good and just want to love everybody around you. Everybody, no matter what's going on. I'm happy now here with all this going on with politics right now in the United States. I could be raging angry and upset with it all, and making certain ones very wrong and bad. And instead, I'm just sitting back and watching it and enjoying what all is going on. And it's because I forgive and I forget. I just let it go. I just let it go at the moment, whatever comes up for me, because sure, I could get upset and get mad with some of what's being said and some of what to me is like stupid stuff that's going on. I can get upset, but it's much, it's so much more. You feel so good to just look at it and say, well, okay, that's the way it's happening right now. Let's see what continues. And you forgive it and let it go.
So if I were to summarize, if a little nugget just popped into my head, it's this: you don't do forgiveness, you are forgiveness.
Exactly. You are, or you be forgiving. You be forgiving, You
Right.
are forgiving, just
Right.
ongoingly, all the time. And that makes such a difference. If you do forgiveness after something has happened, it's hard. It
Mm-hmm.
can be painful. It can be a struggle. You have to make
Right.
yourself do it. I'm talking about just being forgiving because it feels so good. It just feels
Right.
so good to be that way.
Well,
On
one thing,
top of, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, you were going to say something else?
On,
Yeah.
on top of which, it also keeps you healthy. Now,
Right.
yeah, I mean, and I'm talking about the usual kinds of illnesses that we get, colds and flus and all kinds of stuff. It keeps you healthy. It keeps you strong.
We'll talk about some of the benefits of forgiveness here a little bit
Sure.
later.
Okay.
But there was a thought that popped into my head, and now it's gone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the idea is you talk about having an attitude of forgiveness and being in a forgiving state as much as possible. I notice for myself, what I have learned about forgiveness and what seems to be true for me is that when I'm not forgiving, then what I'm doing is I'm kind of getting myself all tied up in the drama of whatever situation has me upset or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that creates more pain for me.
Yes.
It just keeps building pain. It keeps building all that toxic stuff that goes on inside my body. When I can get myself to a place of forgiveness, what that means for me is that I'm essentially giving myself permission to let go of that pain.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about pain is that when you let go of it, then it lets go of you and it just kind of dissipates.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing that I really, obviously my ego mind would not ever have agreed with that kind of thinking.
Right.
But once I did it, once I started practicing that seemed to happen for me. So one of the ways I describe forgiveness is an act I do for myself to free myself of my own pain.
Exactly.
And if I happen to be, let's say my pain, it was something around an issue that happened to involve you, let's say. And I was in my mind creating this image of you as some kind of a demon or a monster or whatever. All I'm doing is projecting out my own darkness onto you and creating pain inside myself. And you may not even be aware that this is going on.
Yeah, right.
And so the truth is, if I, in my mind, forgive you for this situation, you don't even have to know that I've done that, because all I'm really doing is releasing myself from my own pain.
Exactly. The other person does not need to know. Yeah. In fact, I even teach that, is that there are only 2 times that I say you need to tell someone that you have forgiven them. One time, if they have come to you and apologized and said, please forgive me, and you have said something like, are you kidding? I'll never forgive you. You know, bleep, bleep, bleep. I'll never do that. Or the other time that's could be is if the person did something so bad that he or she is in prison for it now. Mm-hmm. And you finally forgive the person. It would be good to let them know in prison. It will make a difference for them in prison if they know that you've forgiven them.
Right.
That's very powerful. But otherwise, no, you don't tell someone. If you have some need to go tell somebody, hey, just want you to know, I have forgiven you for what you did to me last month when you did such and such. I have forgiven you, and I want you to know I've done that. No, you haven't. If you have a need to say that, you haven't completely forgiven. Right. You may be trying to or wanting to or something, but you haven't done it. If you truly forgive someone, you don't have a need to tell them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think that if I'm so caught up in, oh, by the way, I want you to see what a great person I am.
Exactly.
Because I have forgiven you. That's how good I am. I am so much better than you. I mean, it's all ego. That's what it is.
Ego. That's all it is.
That's what's going on there.
Yeah.
Well, I question, and that sometimes I've heard people, say, and I hear this a lot now, will you please forgive me? It's as if my forgiving you in any way is going to reduce whatever guilt you feel. If I forgive you, that's for me. If I don't forgive you, that's also for me.
That's right.
So when you're asking me to forgive you, what you're really asking me is, I am really sorry for what I did. Can you please tell me that you still love me? That's really what that is asking for.
That's really what that's about. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in other words, they are insecure in their own ego constructed pain because of what they believe they have done. And so this is an interesting aspect of forgiveness. I think when someone asks me, can you forgive me? Unless I'm really upset about it in the moment, usually what I'll say is, first of all, I really don't have any need to forgive you, and there's nothing to forgive. This happened. You've apologized. We're good. That's what I say. But if it makes you feel any better, then yes, I forgive you, even though there was nothing for me to do. That's kind of how I treat situations like that. Because I find that way I can still be in integrity with myself, and I can help the person to understand that they didn't need to ask for that forgiveness in the first place.
Yeah. I would say something like, well, just so you know, I already have forgiven you. I forgave you right away so that I could go on and live my life happily and joyfully. And what you did just, didn't stop me. I hope you can forgive yourself. I would say something like that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because ultimately, isn't that the only form of forgiveness that really matters?
Yes. Self-forgiveness. Yes, that is really all that matters. Forgiving yourself. In fact, it's very difficult and sometimes impossible to forgive others if you haven't forgiven yourself for a lot of stuff that's going on. Or maybe you may even think that you may secretly think you caused whatever happened. But you're not going to say, you don't want to forgive yourself, or you're not even thinking about it. So it's not, you don't let that really be there. You just think the other person, got mad and ought to forgive you for whatever. And self-forgiveness is the, something that happened one time. It's so important to forgive oneself. And I've never forgotten this. I was speaking somewhere one time. I finished speaking, and I was standing, and the group was people that wanted to could come talk to me, say anything, whatever. And some man came walking by, and he said, I have no problem forgiving others. I just cannot forgive myself ever for anything. And he never slowed up. He just kept walking and went on out the door. I didn't even get to talk to him. And I've never forgotten that, because all I can remember about him is he must really want to hate himself.
Yeah.
If he's so unwilling to learn to forgive himself. I mean, that's so important for us to forgive ourselves, because we so often beat ourselves up for all kinds of things that we do and don't do.
Right.
And we need to forgive ourselves all the time.
Right. And most of those things that we are holding ourselves hostage to, if you look at them really closely, most of them are pretty small. Most of them are not that important.
Right. Right.
Yeah, right. And we just blow them out of proportion in our ego minds. We make them seem so much bigger and so much worse than they really were. And then we paint ourselves as demons, as horrible people. And we can't possibly forgive that kind of stuff, can we?
Right. Right.
And so that brings up the question, what can we, is there anything in this world that is unforgivable?
I personally don't think so. I can understand that some things might happen to some people that you would think, I mean, if somebody starts shooting a gun in a school and kills just by chance 3 children from one family get killed, that's got to be a horrible thing for a parent to go through, and it's got to be difficult to forgive. But if you want to have a life after that, you've got to forgive. There are things that I think are difficult. The person who wrote a review, just a short review on the back of my book, on the back cover of my book, her name is Abigail. And what she said, the first 2 sentences, when my beautiful daughter, Catherine, was murdered, I spent 12 years raging and lusting for revenge. Forgiveness is what healed my mind, body, and spirit. And she says more, but that's the main thing about what we're talking about now. And
now, before you go on, I want to just point out, just because you forgive somebody who does that kind of thing, it doesn't mean you condone their behavior. No. It doesn't mean that you find that acceptable. It doesn't mean that you're saying, hey, it's okay, you know, we're good now. That's not what you're saying. No. What you're saying is I'm freeing myself from my own pain. Absolutely. And it also doesn't mean you have to forget it. Because after all, if we forget stuff like this, then we're doomed to repeat it.
Yes. I don't... You know, that I think we got into this thing of forgive and forget when someone wrote a book back in the 40s or 50s titled Forgive and Forget. And I think it's one of the worst things that could have happened. And it became a very popular and well-known book. No, you don't forget, and you don't need to forget. I mean, this woman's 18-year-old daughter got murdered simply because she was standing in the wrong place at the wrong moment. And you know, she will never forget that. She speaks about it. She speaks all over the world, has spoken all over the world. I mean, she's in her 80s now and still going strong, doing all kinds of things, you know, to make a difference around forgiveness. She's my great inspiration. But you don't forget that kind of thing, but you can forgive it. You can forgive. She lusted for 12 years because people kept telling her, well, when he's executed, then everything will be fine. You'll see, your life will change completely once they execute him, you know, because he was on death row. And once they execute him, then everything will be fine. It'll all be over with and you can go on with your life. And it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening. Finally, someone said to her, why don't you just forgive him and be done with it? Just forgive him and let it go and be done with it. And she thought about it, and she wrote him a letter and sent it and telling him that she forgave him. And he wrote her back, thanking her and asking her to come see him in the prison. And it was the beginning of a whole new part of her life, because she went to prison. She had never been to one before. She went and visited him and discovered what a hell of a life he was having to live on death row. And she said, my daughter is in heaven with God at peace, and he's in pure hell and has been here for 12 years. And it's continuing
and not only
to live
that,
in this hell.
Yeah, she may have also learned about what kind of hell he was living in beforehand that drove him to this behavior in the first place.
She did. She learned all that. He was both high on drugs and alcohol when he killed the person he intended to kill, and then saw this young woman standing there and shot her just because she was standing there. She was there, and that's the only reason. So, yeah, you know, we learn... forgiving is about all kinds of things, but it sets us free. It sets us free. That's the big thing about forgiveness. It set me free. I mean, in fact, one time after I had been studying this and I got to really working on the making it a habit kind of thing, I was talking to one of my daughters on the phone and saying some things that had become just a way I talk. And that daughter interrupted me at one point and said, Mom, you are saying things I never thought I would hear you say. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, you're talking about forgiveness and just forgiving everybody and everything. And you're talking about, you know, how things are with you and Dad. And you're just saying things in a way I never heard you and never thought I would hear. It's awesome.
Right.
And it's because I learned to make forgiveness a way of life.
Yeah.
And that is what really made the difference. Not something I just do once in a great while when I have to get on with life and I'm stuck and angry at someone. No, that's fine to do that. But what's really best is to just be that way all the time.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, really, no kidding. My husband and I have been married 52 years now, and I never, never, never thought we would be still married at 52 years. I never thought there were times I wanted out so bad you cannot believe it. I wanted out, and here we are, and we're both happy and enjoying each other. But
right, and so what you discovered, obviously, in your journey, you wanted out.
Oh yeah, I wanted out.
But you did get out, because the way you got out was by going in, learning about yourself and about your forgiveness. You went in.
Yes.
And that was your way out.
You got it. That was it. That made all the difference. When I could finally just enjoy being me, being in life, and just being with people without any judgment, without any blaming or make wrong or any need to be right or anything. Just being with people and loving people and just letting people be who they are. Just letting other people be. And so that, because I'm being me, I can let other people be who they are. And I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to make them any certain way,
That's a pretty great way to be, isn't it? Oh. And speaking of which, you mentioned freedom already, the liberation from your own pain and the freedom to be yourself. Those are pretty big deals. Those are important things to have happen in your life. What are some of the other benefits that you see for having a practice, a habit of forgiveness?
Things like I learn to see what works and doesn't work, and I can learn to let go of things that don't work instead of holding on because it feels good and I want to do it once in a while. I let it go. It gives me more freedom. It gives me it actually gives me an inner power that I never had before. I was taught how to behave a certain way, how to be a good person. And so I always thought I had to be a certain way, and I didn't know how to be any other way. I didn't know how to be a particular way around people in some situations. I learned this inner power of just being who I am and loving every second of it. Just enjoying, just living in the joy of being me.
And just doing that, I imagine, gives you a sense of inner peace as well.
Absolutely.
If you have that sense of inner power and freedom, you don't have those pressures all over you. So you feel a lot of peace. And so therefore, less stress. You're going to have probably physical manifestations of improvement of less stress, like lower cortisol levels, lower blood pressure, all these other physical benefits that you may not think about right away.
Exactly. And I haven't been sick. I mean, I hurt myself recently and am seeing a chiropractor and doing some stuff. But other than that, I haven't been sick for years, literally. I don't get sick. I don't get sick and have to go to bed and, or have to go get some pills from the doctor or something. I haven't had that for years. I don't let me just say, I don't get the flu. I don't want people to listen to this and say, oh, okay, I shouldn't take the flu shot. I personally have not taken a flu shot for probably about 35 years. And I haven't gotten the flu for about 40 years. I just don't get sick, but especially, I know it hadn't been that many years that I've been working on forgiveness. So some of that wasn't just forgiveness, but some of it, but it has continued to be that I'm just well. I feel good all the time. And I think a lot has to do with my desire to just be forgiving every minute of every day.
Right. When you first started this, I asked you how this came to be, how you got into the whole forgiveness thing, and you talked about going into a long, deep depression.
Yeah.
And have you found any symptoms of depression at all as a result of doing this? No,
absolutely not. I do not have any sense of depression anymore at all.
Right.
I feel good all the time.
Right. So of course we don't want people to stop taking medications just because we are talking about forgiveness. But we are encouraging people to start thinking about bringing forgiveness into your life.
Yes.
It can have nothing but positive benefits for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. This woman, Abigail, who I read, has the statement on the back of my book. She was one of the reason someone finally told her to try forgiveness is that she was getting sick all the time, and couldn't get over it. She'd see the doctor and take some pills and get over it, and then she'd be sick again, and then she'd be sick again, and then she'd be sick, and she was getting to where she was sick all the time. And that's when she was talking to someone about it, and someone finally said, "Why don't you just forgive the person? Just let it go. Just forgive and let it go and have that out of your life. Be done with it."
Mm-hmm.
It made all the difference. She quit being sick. Once she forgave the guy and started visiting him, she quit being sick. And
Amazing.
like I say, she's in her mid-80s now and still traveling and speaking. California. She lives in California. Well, this guy is in prison in California, and so she and her family are trying, and others are trying hard to make sure he does not get executed. And California just recently passed, said that as long as this governor they have now is in power, there will be no executions. And I saw her. I saw a picture on TV of him speaking, and she was announcing that and talking about it, and she was right at his side. And I mean, here she is in her mid-80s and still going strong at everything.
Right. Yeah.
And I guarantee you it's because she forgave this guy and forgave, everything around it. Just let it all go completely, and has continued to forgive everybody for everything ever since.
Yeah. Well, you and I run into these people all the time who are skeptics and who are based in scientific thinking and won't be convinced unless you have scientific evidence to back up what you're saying.
Yeah.
And yet, what is evidence but simple observation of what's happening, really? And if you see this behavior and you know that before forgiveness we had this, and after forgiveness we have this, well, there's a pretty good chance that there's a correlation, at very least, between the act of forgiveness and the forgiveness habit and proper health, good health,
yes,
healing, all those things.
There definitely is a correlation. Absolutely. And I want to say, I said 40 years, I meant 20 years. I was sitting here thinking 40 years since I had the flu. It's been 20 years since I had the flu. Okay. And about 25 years since I had a flu shot.
Okay.
So rather than 40 years.
You're allowed to have some mistakes in your life.
Thank you.
I forgive you.
Thank you very much.
Well,
okay.
So speaking of this, now we talked about creating a habit of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And you've kind of alluded to this throughout our talk here today. I mean, you said so at the very beginning, really learning how to forgive, not just something that's already happened, but even to the point of anticipating things that are going to happen and forgiving them in advance.
Oh, yeah.
That's something that Tommy Stoffel and I called pre-forgiveness, which I think is a powerful, powerful force that if you can pre-forgive, what you're essentially saying is, I'm ready to forgive anything that happens in my life so that I don't take it on and become enmeshed in some kind of a weird psychological mishmash that involves my ego mind and creates the energetic space for me to start going into depression or into sickness or all that stuff. Instead of allowing that to happen, I just simply forgive everything in advance.
I think
everything.
That's great. I think that's great. I think that's great. Yeah. And I want to say too, that one of some of what I have in my book that we are not spending much time on, and it's okay. We're here to talk about forgiveness, but I have information in my book on how to forgive. How do you get to where you forgive, and how do you make it a way of life? How do you make it a habit? And there are certain things that I emphasize. I'll just touch on them, if that's okay. I'm not going to talk about them, but touch on them. Things that made a difference for me that I learned and discovered and made a difference. And one is expressing gratitude, just being grateful all the time for everything. I don't care, even if it's something upsetting. What I've learned is that I can forgive it and let it go, and I can learn from it. And when I really learn from it and let it go, then I can be grateful that it happened.
Yeah.
You know, I can be grateful that it happened, and then it's likely not to happen again. But there's also just being grateful for, we have so much, and to be grateful for everything all the time, all day, is just so very, very powerful. It gives us a lot of freedom. But then there's also reverence for all. That allows us to get in a certain space of forgiveness. Reverence for all. I mean, go outside and just be outside and be in, connect with the earth and with the sky and with the heavens and with all that is. Connect with it all. Be one with it all. Reverence for all and oneness, just being with it all. Mm-hmm. And then being grateful for all of it gives you a certain inner freedom and power that makes forgiveness natural and easy. Right. I mean, really, those are the things that make a huge difference. But then there's also something that I learned in studying all of this is to give up my poor, old, sad, poor me victim stories. Mm-hmm. You know, how often people come to you, or they'll come to sit down in a group of people and say, "Oh, you cannot believe what happened to me yesterday. Oh my God," and they start telling their victim story. And by the time they're done telling their victim story, someone else will say, "You think that's bad? Wait till you hear what happened to me."
Yeah, that's and right. Then, the commiseration process begins.
And you go on and on with how bad life is, when in fact, and then we just get sucked into, oh, it's so bad. Oh, and we're big time victims. When in fact, if you tell a story of, oh, let me tell you what happened to me yesterday, and you tell a story of love and joy and happiness, and how happy you made people feel and how good it made you feel, and you just express the joy and the love and encourage others to tell a story like that, then everyone's talking about how great life is, and then you can bring up forgiveness, and it's like, yeah, oh yeah, forgive that. Oh yeah, I could do. And they start to get it. Okay, now?
I can hear you again. I'm sorry about that. I honestly do not know what's going on here. The universe is conspiring to make it really, really hard.
Oh, that's funny. That is funny. And I didn't touch. Are you talking? Say something.
I'm talking, yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. I heard you. Okay, I can hear you. I didn't even have my hands anywhere near the computer, so it wasn't anything I did, No, my hands were down here. I wasn't even touching anything.
No. It's okay. I just heard this really weird noise in my headset, and I thought something happened to your microphone. So I thought, well, if it's not your microphone, then it must be mine. I'm leaving. I'm going to come back in. Anyway, I apologize for that, and this has been one of the most interesting conversations we've had. I think we've had a pretty comprehensive discussion about forgiveness and about how to create a habit out of it. You mentioned before the episode that you had some kind of a free gift that you wanted to offer. You had some kind of a journal or something for forgiveness.
Oh, it's not okay. The forgiveness one isn't up yet. I'll get it up this coming weekend. But there on my website, I am posting some journals, because I encourage gratitude so much, and someday I hope you can have me on and let's really talk about gratitude and the power of gratitude. Okay, but I have created some journals, and each journal is 30 pages, and 15 of the pages have a beautiful, beautiful picture on them, and beautiful quotes about whatever the topic is for that journal. And they're not free, but they are only for a gratitude journal where you get inspired, and then there's pages you can write on, or however you want to do it. But you can, for $4.95, you get one journal for $4.95, and then you download it and you have it. You have it all the time. You do what you want with it. and those pages that you write on, well, you can just keep doing them, using them forever, and put them in a folder and keep working with them. And there's, at this point, there are, 6 gratitude journals. There's 3 that are on the topic of just gratitude, all the quotes.
Right. And so we find this on your website at, what's it called? The Habit of?
No, the Forgiveness Habit.
NotForgivenessHabit.org.
That's it. And also there is some free stuff there that you can look at, what I call a meditation room. Okay.
Excellent. Well, I want people to know about that. So the forgivenesshabit.org.
Yes.
And you have the in front of it, right?
The forgiveness. It's just like my book, And the book is available on Amazon. You can get it a lot faster ordering it through Amazon than ordering it through me. I assure you, Amazon gets it right out to you and I don't. So I go to Amazon if you want it. It's also, it's paperback and ebook, whatever you want. Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being with me today, JoAnn. I'm sorry about all the technical glitches that have been going on, but here we are. We managed to get through it, and I'm glad to see that the people didn't leave the call just because we had some technical problems.
Great.
So anyway, thank you all for participating in today's program. Remember, you can watch recordings of this and every other show that I've done on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. And as you go through your week, I encourage you to remember the Life Mastery mantra. Gratefully forgive the imperfect being you have been in the past. Gratefully accept the magnificent being that you are today. Gratefully welcome the evolved being that you are becoming in each new moment. Until we meet again, I am David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your journey. Bye-bye for now. See you, JoAnn.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure. So great to be with you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.